blue, white, red, mid-range.
2 different Facebook accounts, by the way, Orrin Beasley and Orrin Beasley's mustache.
Yeah.
So you double follow.
Yeah, and enough like just volume of space that they probably qualify as just 2 different legal entities.
Yeah.
He's one of our more successful grinders. He's based out of North Carolina, I believe.
Indeed.
Some Grand Prix top 8s to his name.
Yep.
Bunch of open success, and he's playing blue, white, red, mid-range. We've seen different permutations of this. I guess the flash deck or the shell of Augur Bolus, Restoration Angel, and Snapcaster Mage. And then your usual smattering of removal, Sphinx's Revelation, some permission, Runechanter's Pike. We've seen permutations of this deck all through the format since Return to Ravnica has been here. I know Adam Prozac and Jerry Thompson have advocated and constructed this deck different ways, and so no stranger to the format.
And on the left, we have Reid, who you guys are probably intimately familiar with, writer for StarCityGames.com, 5 Grand Prix top 8s, does very well in this circuit as well. He is playing, as usual, Bant Control. I actually had dinner with Reid last night. I asked him what he's playing. He said, I'm just playing the same deck. I have my 2 Grand Prix top 8s with it, as we see at Farseek. Just doing what I normally do. At Grand Prix San Antonio, I was calling him the king of the Drown Yard.
Yep.
He just every time I walked over, he was just activate Drown Yard. Just untap, playing really fast. I got Amelia. With his boyish good looks, we also call him the June calendar boy. If there was a magic calendar, he would be June.
Sure.
Not sure what month Kibler would be. We're still deciding there.
Every month.
Yeah.
All 12. So Beasley starting off the action on his turn with a turn 2 Augur Bolus, finding a Searing Spear, attacks Reid on the 3rd turn for 1, plays a 2nd Augur, finding Sphinx's Revelation, and we'll see if he has a 3rd land drop shortly. Yeah, he has a Steam Vents, and he'll send the turn back.
So as we see Reid on tap here, this is a pretty classic matchup in Magic history, honestly. There's mid-range versus pure control. Typically, from what I've seen in the past in Magic history, this normally favors the pure control deck. Reid's deck, really is able to just grind them down with various means of card advantage, Wrath of God type effects, and just really make what Orrin is doing to be, for the most part, rather relevant. Look, I know you have Orrin's deck list in front of you. Is there anything that you see here that would kind of change what is a typical outlook in these type of matchups?
Well, he has 2 copies of Counterflux. I mean, if you look at sort of historic, and there's a Supreme Verdict to get rid of the Augurs. If you look at the history of Magic, when the mid-range decks or the tempo decks, whatever you want to call them, have good matchups against control, it's usually either because the clock is especially fast, or they have permission or disruption that is actually meaningful against the control deck, as Reid plays a 5th land and a Thragtusk. Beasley's deck doesn't have a ton of these elements. He has a couple counter spells, but his clock isn't particularly fast, and that Thragtusk was met with a Counterflux. And so I believe this matchup favors Reid because Beasley neither has a ton of disruption or a particularly fast clock.
Now, one thing that you guys will notice, as we did see a Counterflux here from Orrin, and we'll bring Counterflux up on the screen for you in just a moment. Counterflux and Dissipate are 2 cards that essentially do the same thing, but they actually don't. Counterflux is a card that's uncounterable, and that's been picking up a lot recently because it always counters Sphinx's Revelation. And that's a big deal because, what some people would do, and this is Reid included, is they would board in Dispels to go along with their Sphinx's Revelation. Sphinx's Revelation for X-1, one, of course, being able to leave Dispel up, and, you couldn't counter it because then you would just dispel whatever counterspell you used, and the Sphinx's Revelation would resolve, and the game would end. Counterflux mitigates that problem very, very well.
Yes.
But, of course, by playing Counterflux, and the overloading Counterflux does matter, is you're not playing Dissipate, and Dissipate, exiling something from the game like an Unburial Rites, like a creature that Unburial Rites could actually bring back, is a big deal. Also, exiling spells for Snapcaster Mage. So there's some opportunity costs associated with both cards.
Yes, but certainly counter is very valuable against his control deck. So as you see, Reid both Farseek and then Augur into Think Twice. Orrin's going to take this opportunity to land a Revelations for 2 at the end of Reid's turn.
Baby Revelation.
The first one generally tries to set up the second one.
Yes, as we do see the second one drawn for Orrin off of the first one. Just hitting some land drops. And this is kind of the issue when you're playing a mid-range deck. And it kind of goes back to, if you look in years past, kind of like the Rock, where, if you draw the right half of your deck, you're really good to go. But like we see Orrin's hand right now, he has 2 Searing Spears. He has a Azorius Charm, which, was it going to cycle? You see a Supreme Verdict, which is, good in the aggressive matchups or even in the mid-range mirrors. But in this matchup, this is what Reid wants to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And you saw Reid hold back with his Augur Bolas last turn instead of attacking into Beasley's empty board. And that was because of the threat of Restoration Angel. It's very likely that Orrin would have it there because he hasn't had an opportunity to really play it yet for value. And so Reid willing to sacrifice a potential point of damage that probably doesn't matter very much to keep his auger around.
And, you know, we were calling Reid the king of the frown yard last week for a reason, because, as you said, the damage doesn't really matter. That's not really how he's going to go about winning his matches. You know, he's just going to, you know, establish control, and then it's drown yard time as we see Overgrown Tomb coming to play for Reid. And, you know, he only has one black source in his deck, and that's for those Nephalia drown yards.
Yep. Beasley cycles his Azorius Charm at a turn. Reid's fine letting that go. And, yeah, Orrin is just choking on a hand of Searing Spears, and just it's hard for him to get any momentum in the game right now. Reid's just happy to sit here, develop his mana, and set up a big revelation at some point down the line.
Yeah. And this is, as we see a Thought Scour here from Orrin, he's going to turn over a Counterflux and Augur of Bolas. He will draw another Thought Scour. This is, you know, kind of the danger of playing a blue-iron mid-range deck, but just choosing your deck in general for this tournament. You know, blue-iron mid-range does have good matchups in the format. You know, it kind of wants to be paired up against, you know, the aggressive decks or the other mid-rangey decks that are kind of floating around, but this is the matchup that he doesn't want to be anywhere near.
Yeah, another Thought Scour. Finds a Hollow Fountain.
So we see Hollow Fountain coming to play untapped for Orrin. And, you know, that's kind of, it's kind of what's nice about the standard format right now is that, like, things are so wide open that, you know, you can make your deck selection, your deck can be good, and you can build your 75 very, very well, but there are bad matchups in the format for each deck.
Oh, absolutely. And especially with how the mana of the format is, you can basically, within limits, play kind of whatever you want to. And so there's a lot of room to sort of metagame your deck towards the threats that you anticipate playing against. But a lot of these cards are very good against some things and not very good against others, as Beasley is finding out with these Searing Spears that are just sort of hanging out.
Yeah. As we see Reid, he played his second Overgrown Tomb, and he also has his Nephalia Drown Yard. King of the Drown Yard going to work. Going to start targeting Orrin, and this is how Reid has been winning games for the past month and a half, 2 months with Band Control. He has 2 Grand Prix top 8s with this deck back-to-back. Second one in San Antonio, the first one the week prior. The Grand Prix escaped me. I believe it was in Charlotte, is where he top 8'd as well. So you know that coming into this tournament, if you're Orrin, you have an idea of what Reid is playing, and you know that he's going to play it very, very well.
Yep. As a second Augur finds a Farseek, I believe Reid's going to, yep. Farseek again. Again, every mana counts when you have Sphinx's Revelation and you have these counterspell fights. It's very hard to feel like you're flooding out. You have lands that have activated powers. I mean, this is definitely a format where the control decks want to be playing a ton of mana sources. So Reid shuffling away.
And Reid's deck has 26 lands in his deck, and he has 4 Farseeks as well. I mean, other cards to make sure he hits his land drops, like Think Twice, cycling Azorius Charm. So yeah, he just wants to play a land every turn.
Yep.
That's all he wants to do.
So now with that Drown Yard starting to go, and Reid with a full hand, and he's tapped some mana, Orrin's going to land his Restoration Angel here at the end of the turn and try to get... He needs to start attacking. Can't sit here all day.
And there is permission hiding in Reid's deck. He does have 4 copies of Dissipate in his deck, you know, so he does have ways to fight over cards that he feels like do matter. But at this point, it doesn't really seem like Restoration Angel is really doing all that much. So he just chooses to let that go, activate a Drown Yard, move back to his turn.
Yeah, Reid not under a ton of pressure, although all those Searing Spears in Beasley's hand could end up throwing off the map. Reid is actually not nearly as safe as his life total would indicate right now. Beasley's just drawn an Unsummon. Appears to be 1 main deck copy.
He does have another Restoration Angel in there. It looks like he has 2 Searing Spears and a Pillar of Flame as well, so as we're going to see a Restoration Angel here from Reid.
And that is also a singleton.
Looking to blink one of these Augur Bolas, get a little deeper into his deck.
And this is where the game starts to get really rough for Orrin. He doesn't really want to use these Searing Spears to like mow down this Augur, but he also can't just let Reid defend himself and block a bunch. So he's gonna Searing Spear the one that Reid targeted with the Restoration Angel trigger. Reid is gonna block, and then post combat Beasley uses Pillar of Flame to finish off the Angel.
Not a bad turn.
Yeah, it wasn't bad. But, you know, ideally, from Orrin's perspective, you would be able to sit on those pillars and try to set up kind of a kill out of nowhere.
Try to go to the nug, as it were, your
Yeah.
specialty.
Yeah, I mean, it's he certainly does not have an inevitability here. The longer this game goes on, I mean, if Reid is able to land a revelation from here, almost certainly Orrin can't come back from that. So time is not on his side.
So we're going to see restoration. It'll come across again for Orrin. Looks like it's going to knock Reid down to 16.
Yeah. I believe that's a... it looks like Orrin has a Supreme Verdict in his hand as well, which is also a singleton, but clearly not at its best here.
And you see Reid taking a look at Orrin's graveyard here, just trying to get some information. Obviously, Snapcaster Mage is a card that is in heavy numbers in the blue-red mid-range deck. He wants to know what he needs to play around, kind of get an idea, some information for not just this particular game, but just games moving forward as well.
And it's part of the risk of trying to win the game off of Drown Yard against some of these tempo decks is there's just a lot more utility you're giving them out of their graveyard. Moreland Haunt could be a thing. And Reid's going to go for a big revelation here. That's for 5.
You see he's left open access to not only Nefali Drown Yard, but he can also cast Dissipate as well if he has one in his hand.
Yeah. And I like this play a lot from Reid, given how Beasley didn't fight over the Restoration Angel. There's a reasonable chance that the coast is just clear here.
Yep. And we do know that Orrin does have a Counterflux in his graveyard, so if he does have a Snapcaster Mage, he can counter this card. But it'll be interesting, as you saw Orrin move forward an Island and a Plains, which can only mean one thing. Possibly a revelation in response.
Yep.
For some heavy number. We can trade blows here, as it were.
Yeah, and he's going to fire back.
So you're going to see a Sphinx of Revelation here from Orrin for 4. He carefully left up 5 mana, and what that 5 mana means to me is Snapcaster Mage for the Counterflux in his graveyard.
Yeah, and he's just drawn 2 Snapcasters. So Beasley found the card he was looking for, but if Reid has a Dissipate here, it's not going to ultimately stop this revelation. Just letting it go.
Yep. And we're going to see the Counterflux flashback. So maybe it's possible that Reid was baiting there.
Yeah. Again, Beasley not with a ton of... I mean, his deck's got to be fairly whittled down at this point. And even though that revelation for 4... it clearly matters. I mean, Reid would prefer for it not to resolve. Reid might be in a position where he actually just has to fend off a couple of turns. Is that a game 1 Rest in Peace?
That is a 1 single copy of Rest in Peace main from Reid. And we're going to see a Thragtusk here as well, bolstering his life to a little bit and also presenting a threat. Interesting to see in Reid's deck list. The 1 main deck Rest in Peace is a little bit different from what he's been doing in weeks past, as you guys do see Rest in Peace, and I think we're going to become intimately familiar with that card across both formats this weekend.
Ooh, and Beasley has actually just drawn a Rune Chancer's Pike, and that gives him actually a considerable clock now
if Rest in Peace hadn't come in play.
Yes.
So that was very, very timely of Reid to have that 1 copy of that card. And I think that's one of the reasons, and there are many reasons in the format, of course, to have it in your main deck, but that's one of the main reasons.
Yeah, now that Drown Yard doesn't have that much longer to go for Beasley to be shut out of this game.
Now, one of the things that is interesting here is that, he has the 1 main deck Rest in Peace, and he doesn't have a main deck Elixir of Immortality anymore. He's kind of, and obviously those 2 cards don't work very well together, so it makes sense. But one of the ways that this deck was winning in weeks prior was just kind of grinding him down, revelating, shuffling your stuff back in with Elixir, and, honestly, just make you tap out before finishing the game. As we see that Orrin only has 12 cards left in his library.
So do you think the 1 main deck Rest in Peace was inspired by the Grand Prix winning deck from last weekend?
Maybe, yeah. The deck, the human deck that won, the human reanimator deck.
The big floods.
Yeah. Flash flood, as it were. Yeah, I could see that happening, honestly. But I mean, if you just look across the format of what Rest in Peace can do, I mean, we just saw it just blow up Orrin this game.
Yes.
Shuts off Pike, shuts off Snapcaster, really blew him up this game. But it's effect across the format of even small cards like Think Twice, Gravecrawler, Dross Messenger. It definitely has some impact. It's a nice 1 of card to have, I think.
So Beasley trying to stick a Restoration Angel at the end of the turn here. Not much to blink, obviously. Can't do anything with the Restoration Angel, and that Snapcaster has no utility at this point, but Beasley just trying to close out the game here before the Drown Yard finishes him off.
Feels like one of those movie scenes to me where, some sort of boat floods and the water's just moving up. You're just like, we gotta go find Jimmy or whatever. the water is just coming up on Orrin right now, and he doesn't want to go under. before it's too late, as we see a Drown Yard activation.
Yeah, most decks in the format are using their graveyard to some effect.
Yeah.
So one rest in peace in a deck with a ton of card drawing is pretty low opportunity cost, and then you see games like this where it's just devastating.
Yeah. As we see a Terminus from Reid.
Not entirely a combo with the Drown Yard kill, but that's fine.
Yeah.
Good enough to get it done.
We're going to see that Singleton Unsummon that you talked about earlier from Orrin, targeting a Restoration Angel. Terminus, also a card that we are going to become pretty familiar with this weekend in both formats, Patrick. As you know, it's been seeing a lot of play in Legacy, but it's also been seeing a lot of play in Standard now because of zombies.
Yes. There's a lot of creatures, whether it's because of Undying or some sort of durability against Supreme Verdict. You know, you saw Kibler's deck, which is just a sea of regeneration creatures.
Yeah.
Terminus gives you, you know, a little bit of an edge against people who are playing creatures to metagame against Supreme Verdict. And, you know, you can also mize around with it too, which is nice.
Yeah, there's also, you know, there are those big turns, and this is something that I was talking with AJ Soccer about last weekend, of, you know, the ultimate turn where, you know, you go a Miracle Terminus, and then you're able to also play Planeswalker or Thragtusk or whatever, all in the same turn, which is just awesome.
Yeah, those swings are what can put the control deck firmly in the driver's seat. So Beasley again playing the Restoration Angel. He unsummoned at the end of the turn.
It feels like to me Reid is just trying to hold on here.
Yeah.
Feels a little bit weak.
Yeah, his hand. We don't get a good look at his hand here. It's possible that he just doesn't have a lot to defend himself with at this point. Because he's getting within range. I mean, Beasley has a Searing Spear.
And Orrin's deck is only down to like 4 or 5 cards, and
Yeah, okay. He doesn't have enough to kill him this turn, and Reid just go Drown Yard, untap, Drown Yard you again, and that's it.
So Reid Duke up a game here against Orrin Beasley in a match of, it's a hair versus hair match. It's like a WWE, loser shaves it off.
Yeah, it's a hair mirror.
Yeah. You have Orrin's deck list in front of you. He is down a game and looking to turn things in his favor.
He has a negate. He has 2 copies of Oblivion Ring, which are normally good against these control decks because they have some amount of Planeswalkers, although Reid's has 0 main. So at least game 1, Oblivion Ring wouldn't be particularly good. The big one is 2 copies of Jace Memory Adept. We've seen this card pick up a little bit in popularity over the last couple weeks because of the ban, 4-color control deck, whatever, stuff in that space. It's very easy to just, if you resolve Jace because these decks aren't particularly good at attacking, very easy to win by just mill 10, mill 10, mill 10, the end.
That's it. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this is a card that Jerry Thompson has been championing a little bit. He played it in the sideboard of his blue, white, red flash deck. You know, he's just like, I'm going for the throat with this card. Of, you know, I'm not going to try to fight over Sphinx's Revelations and all this nonsense. Just try to get this in play. You know, maybe protect it and just upstairs 3 times, 30 cards. That's going to do it. And milling people out, as we have just seen in that particular game, is a viable strategy in these control mirrors.
Yes, I mean, I was the round that I have off previously. I watched Noah Kessel get Jaced out of his match. It's a real thing in these control matchups, and so many of these control decks are a lot of defend myself and a lot of card drawing, and not a lot of ways to battle Planeswalkers, except for, you know, some spot removal like Oblivion Rings or whatever. It's not like previous formats where you have man lands or some of these decks have more attacking elements. The Planeswalkers are just pretty good against these decks. A lot of that is mitigated by the fact that a lot of them are fairly low impact. I mean, Garrick making a 3/3 every turn. The control deck can fight against that.
Sure. You
know, Jace, the Return to Ravnica Jace, its powers are okay, but certainly something you can withstand. But Memory Adept is lethal very fast. You do not have much time to get out from under that.
Yeah, that card does not mess around at all as far as the clock is concerned.
Yeah.
Taking a look at Reid's sideboard here, he is up a game. And as you brought up, there are no Planeswalkers in Reid's deck list this week. There have been Planeswalkers in previously, but you're not going to find any in the main deck here. But you are going to find a Jace Memory Adept, as we just talked about, in his sideboard as well. He only has 1 copy, where Orrin has 2. He also has an additional copy of Rest in Peace. Rock's Faith Mender you're not really going to see here. You might see, and this is kind of interesting, you see a Restoration Angel in his sideboard. To go along with the one that he has main deck, which I find to be a little interesting, along with an Azorius Charm, the 4th one in his sideboard as well. So those are a little bit curious. Normally you find those cards in main decks or not at all.
Yeah.
2 Dispels, 2 Negates, a Detention Sphere, a Pithing Needle, 2 Terminus, and a Silklash Spider. We're probably going to see the 2 Dispels and the 2 Negates join us, maybe.
Yeah.
And the reason I say maybe is because Reid saw Counterflux main deck from Orrin. So his plan of fighting over Sphinx's Revelation may not work as well now.
Yeah, it's still hard to imagine that, it's hard to imagine if I'm in Reid's position that Negate's going to be bad, because Beasley's deck is so spell heavy, and presumably he's signing into either more counters of his own or Planeswalkers. So
Sure.
I would have to assume that Negate would be good here. A lot of these control sideboards, and you've seen sort of a philosophical shift over the last couple of years, a lot more 1 and 2 card oriented than previous sideboards, where it was a lot of more 3s and 4s. And I believe the theory is once you're drawing a bunch of cards, that you just see more of your cards, so it's like playing 4-ofs when you have these 2-of and 1-of slots. Also, your main deck is going to be about trying to fight a bunch of different decks. And so often your sideboarding is going to be, well, I need to get rid of this Rest in Peace against this deck without much of a graveyard element, this Terminus, whatever, and you just want to be bringing in a couple different spells to shore up the matchups. So you're not really looking for aces. You're not looking for things that just lock your opponent out of the game. You're just looking for things that improve your matchup and allow you to take out the cards that aren't effective in your first game.
So we see both players are sideboarding here. Now, one thing that you did bring up, Patrick, is that in
Beasley going back to 6 here.
Okay. In Orrin's sideboard, he has 2 copies of Oblivion Ring. Typically, in these 4-color control decks, especially Reid's deck, normally you're going to find, 1 to 3 copies of 4-mana Jace from Return to Ravnica. Maybe it's Emio, the Moon Sage, what have you, some sort of Planeswalker and some numbers. And that's why you would normally board an Oblivion Ring here. Taking a look at Reid's deck list, we know that there are no Planeswalkers this week outside of the one Jace Memory Adept in the sideboard. So if you're Orrin, you're likely bringing in Oblivion Ring anyway.
Yeah.
Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think it's likely.
And so there's the off chance that, him bringing it in, not really going to do anything.
Yeah, no, Reid's deck is definitely basically immune to the Detention Sphere, Oblivion Ring style stuff that we've seen be effective against other control decks in the format. So it's possible Beasley has some pretty close to dead Oblivion Rings in his deck.
And I find that kind of interesting. Maybe that was just a conscious decision by Reid to not play any of the Planeswalkers or any of the cards that do get hit by Oblivion Ring and Detention Sphere type stuff on this particular weekend.
Well, it's also just once you are putting Planeswalkers in your deck, you have to make a lot more concessions to just fight over creatures in general.
Sure.
Because so much of your game plan is sculpting around protecting your Planeswalkers. It's possible Reid just wants to use his Light Tool as a resource, defend himself with his Wrath effects and his Sphinx's Revelations, and never really worry about having to fight over sort of marginal boards or creatures that don't really matter that much, because he's trying to protect his Planeswalker.
Sure.
I mean, you see it all the time. These control decks often get hands that are all in on their one Planeswalker, and then every single 1/1 and 2/2 their opponent plays matters. It requires some sort of response to keep their Planeswalker alive, and Reid's deck can just ignore that altogether. He doesn't have to fight over any of that kind of stuff.
So we see Reid shuffling Orrin's deck, giving it back. Orrin looking for a keepable 6. Again, this is just...
This is 5.
Oh, this is... Oh, excuse me. I did not see that second mulligan. Jeez.
This is 5. All right. Looks
And
like
he
we
is
are
gonna
happy
keep.
enough.
As happy enough as he can be on 5. I mean, it's going to be tough as we see a Searing Spear drawn. The one thing that, is kind of difficult with this blue-wired mid-range deck is that it doesn't really have a way to, kind of filter its draws with Think Twice and, some of the other ways to kind of get himself out of this mulligan. He has 4 Thought Scours.
Yeah.
That's really it. I mean, he has 4 Azorius Charm to cycle, but, this isn't a deck that mulligans incredibly well.
Yeah, his only real way to catch up on raw card count is Augur and Snapcaster on cantrips. He doesn't have, like you said, the Think Twice, that sort of durability. As you see Reid cycling, just getting a lot of velocity here, helping him find his land drops and eventually get to his big stuff.
It's something that Reid's deck can do that Orrin's deck really can't do. As we see Reid play his 4th line, we're going to see a Restoration Angel end of turn. Now, what we do know is that Orrin does have a Jace Memory Adept looming in his hand. And there's the 5th land, so this will be interesting.
Yeah, Reid was not willing to counter that Restoration Angel.
Does Reid have Dissipate? Does Reid have Negate? Does Orrin go for it here?
Yeah, he might not get to pick a better spot. If you don't cast anything this turn, Reid's going to be able to flashback his Thing Twice and untap with 4 mana in play, probably play a 5th land. Your odds of resolving this are not getting any better, particularly when you don't have... He has no other threats to bait out. I think Beasley's hand is just a couple Searing Spears, so how can you pick a better spot than this?
Yeah, and we do see the Steam Vents coming to play on tap, so Patrick, I think he agrees with you, and he's going to go for it, and you see a Dissipate there from Reid. So.
And I don't think Beasley has a choice there. I think he just has to try to land his best card there.
Based on his hand, based on his mulligan 5, and again, there is a Think Twice being flashbacked if he doesn't go for it. 5th land, maybe he slams down a Thragtusk. Restoration Angel doesn't do a very good job of protecting his Planeswalker against Thragtusk, momentary lapse. So, I agree. I think he just has to go for it and hope he gets there.
Yeah. Particularly on 5 cards, you can't try to play around everything.
So we see a Sun Petal Grove and just a pass back, so it looks like Orrin's going to be able to get in some more damage, and we see at least 1 Searing Spear over there, maybe 2.
His hand was 2 Searing Spears, and he drew an Oblivion Ring this turn.
Okay. So we see Think Twice being flashed back by Reid on tapping, drawing. So, I mean, again, this is kind of the situation that we were in the first game in which, it's just trying to win the damage race in a, kind of a unique way with those burn spells. The Restoration Angel trying to hold on.
Yeah. Not an easy task, though, particularly on 5 cards.
Yeah.
So Reid auguring into Think Twice.
And Orrin right now is just going, please don't play Thragtusk. Please don't play Thragtusk. I just want to try to get you dead as fast as I can.
Beasley actually has a shot here if Reid doesn't find a Thragtusk. I mean, he drew Augur Bolas this turn. Just finding 1 counterspell, it's not out of the question he could hold off for long enough to have those Searing Spears matter and be able to finish out the game.
So we see Orrin go by, he does find an Unsummon along with an Island and a Restoration Angel, which are going to go to the bottom. Yeah, if Orrin was able to find a Counterflux that turn, or some sort of counterspell, he may be able to steal this one. Not to say that he still can't, but I think that would have made it a lot easier.
Yeah, and the window's closing. I mean, that's the biggest concern now. Reid's seen so many cards, he's making so many land drops that, he can land any one of his haymakers here. Supreme Verdict, Thragtusk, Sphinx's Revelation, they're all devastating in all possibilities.
But we just see Reid play a Hidden Land Harbor and pass back, so we see a Clifftop Retreat drawn for Orrin. Orrin still just trying to get in there.
Yep, just
coming across.
Reid down to 8 and 2 Searing Spears in hand. I mean,
now, one interesting thing that I did see before Orrin did attack, he moved that Oblivion Ring forward a little bit, and moved it back, maybe considering, so we're going to see, I think, a Revelation here with the spell protection, for 3 by Reid. He was considering maybe Oblivion Ring that Augur Bolas. Is that something that you would have considered doing, maybe pulled the trigger on?
No, that Augur doesn't really matter. I mean, it only matters if Reid has Restoration Angel, and Restoration Angel is already a disaster for you in this spot because your only clock is your own angel, so...
there's a bit of a discussion that could be had about, maybe I Oblivion Ring his Augur to be able to get in with my Augur to get in that extra point. It doesn't really change the clock very much, but, desperate men, desperate measures.
Yeah, the upside is that you send Reid to 7, but when your closeout is 2 Searing Spears, it doesn't matter too much. It only matters if you're able to then connect with the Augur again the following turn, which seems, we're hoping for a lot to break right.
Yeah, kind of dubious at best.
Yeah.
As we see Reid cast the Farseek here, he's going to get an Overgrown Tomb, so he's setting up the Frown Yard. He does have the black mana now if he draws one.
And the Revelation at the end of the turn, giving him much more of a cushion here. And his hand is just loaded with action, and I think he's just trying to make sure he doesn't walk into any negate, essence, scatter, counterflux type action. He's just trying to protect himself against those kind of cards as much as possible.
And we see this Augur Bolas fun to Think Twice for Reid, and he's doing a nice job of setting up his game plan, as we're going to see Drown Yard come into play now. But again, his life total is at risk, and it has been for a little while here. And I think he's just looking for that one Thragtusk to gain him 5 life, and then he's kind of going to be comfortable.
Yes.
It's going to give him a couple of turns of reprieve to be able to do what he wants to do. But again, as you said during game 1, even though he is at 11 life, it's not as safe as you would really think he's going to be. So you see Orrin draw an Augur of Bolas. He's going to come across here again with Restoration Angel, knocking Reid down to 8. We know he has 2 spears, which theoretically puts him at 2.
I'm actually a little surprised Beasley there didn't try to fire off 1 spear at the end of the turn, because it means that then Snapcaster is also a lethal draw.
Sure.
It does set off the warning bells a little bit from Reid's perspective. Maybe he plays a little bit differently with you firing it off there, but if I was in Beasley's position, I would want to make sure that if Reid does mess up, or if I draw a Snapcaster and I feel like I can go for it, that you have as many draws as possible to make that happen.
Now, interesting thing that just happened here. Orrin plays a Augur of Bolas in the second main phase. It showed him a Sphinx's Revelation and a Thought Scholar.
Yes.
Now, Thought Scour, a little bit of velocity, get him a new card immediately. Sphinx of Revelation, obviously there's some setup here, and Reid did represent a Dispel when he cast his own Sphinx of Revelation. Would you have taken Thought Scour there, or are you okay with his decision to take Sphinx of Revelation for kind of a down-the-road type scenario?
I'm fine with taking Revelation there, because if it does draw to Dispel, that means, assuming Reid only has one counter in his hand, it means that you're drawing live next turn into another Searing Spear or Snapcaster Mage to flash it back. You need to find a spell impactful enough to actually induce a counter spell at this point, because you're trying to cobble together some lethal draw.
Now, in Reid's hand, it looks like he's moving forward the Rest in Peace, okay, and he does play that. And we do know that he has a Thragtusk. I did just catch a glimpse of that as well, so it's going to be interesting to see the route that he tries to take to basically stabilize here.
I mean, Thragtusk with Dispel backup seems pretty awesome here, but I guess Reid is finding a different line.
Let's see what decision Orrin comes to. Orrin is just going to pass back. He's not going to fire off those spears just yet. Draws third spear.
Ooh.
That's a huge draw. Now, what do we have here from Reid? Feels like a Restoration Angel to me. Okay.
Beasley has lethal in hand.
He does. Now, this is interesting because, let's say that the Restoration Angels run into each other. Reid tries to activate a Drown Yard. He's dead.
Yeah. And it's very unlikely that 3 Searing Spears is on his radar right now as a possibility.
Now, my question is, and I think it's pretty safe to assume that Reid knows that Searing Spear is in his deck, but did he see a Searing Spear game 1?
Yes, an Augur got killed in response to a Restoration Angel trigger.
Perfect.
So yeah, Reid is aware that it's in the deck, but putting him on 3 here is... And I think Beasley is contemplating using an Unsummon to clear it out of the way.
Yeah.
But it seems dubious to me, unless you have a 7th mana. Because then, if Reid's willing to replay the Restoration Angel, then you can just fire off your 3 spears. Yeah, he's just going to let it go.
Yep. And, obviously, Reid has 2 Grand Prix top 8s with this deck, so I think, obviously, he's very good at playing this sort of deck. He knows exactly what he's doing. But again, it's interesting because, you can make the argument for, milling him in a turn, but again, Reid can just simply say, why would I ever put my shields down here?
Right.
As we are going to see an Unsummon on the Restoration Angel now.
Is he targeting Reid's Restoration Angel?
Yeah. And Reid's going to be dissipating that.
All right, this is before blocks.
Yep. You see Orrin thumbing through those spears. I mean, it's a tough play there. I mean, Patrick, if you're in that situation that Orrin's in right now, do you try to fire off on Unsummon there and try to bounce it to get through? Because then he can just replay it, and then we can't kill him in response to him replaying it because we can't triple spear him. Or do you just let him run into each other and hope that he makes the mistake?
I would probably be happy to pass there, because if Reid uses the Drown Yard, he just dies. If Reid is willing to just untap, then your Revelation is likely to draw out some sort of response, and then you get to go for it again with your 3 spears. But I think unsummoning his Restoration Angel just tips your cap a little bit too much. There's no way this is happening unless Orrin's hand is something pretty specific. Whereas if you just let them bounce off each other with your mana up, it just looks like you're going to Revelate at the end of the turn.
Yeah.
Reid might actually be willing to use his Drown Yard there, and then you get to punk him out with your Searing Spears.
Yeah, there's a situation there where, there's a line of thought there that Reid is like, okay, you can Revelate for 3, that's fine. I don't really care about you drawing 3 cards. As we're going to see a Silklash Spider here. So now we have a decision here, and I think Orrin's going to go for a Sphinx Revelation.
Yeah, I like this play quite a bit.
As do I.
It may draw out a counter, which is awesome, and if not, that's also fine.
Yeah, I don't mind 2 cards right now.
Yep.
As we do see Silklash Spider, but this is the Onslaught one.
And we saw a lot of this in Las Vegas last week if you were with us.
Yep.
A lot of Silklash Spiders on the pit, both in Standard and in Legacy.
Big draw there from Orrin. Orrin draws 2, and then his draw set for the turn was a Counterflux. So we see a Sulphur Falls come into play. We know that he has the 3 spears in his hand as well, so this is pretty critical here.
Yeah. Reid is in a weird amount of danger. He might not actually know the full extent of...
2, 3.
And now, for example, Beasley could try to test by Searing Spearing twice here, and he has a Counterflux to cover against
the other one.
Anything that could happen.
Looks like that's what he's going to do. So we're going to see a first Searing Spear here upstairs. And the Counterflux is the interesting card that he drew for the turn as Reid mills one. You know, assuming that there are probably either 1 to 2 copies in Orrin's deck, he mills one. We know that Orrin has one in his hand, and I think that Counterflux that's in Orrin's hand is basically there to counter the Thragtusk.
Yeah.
So we're going to see another Spear here from Orrin. You're going to see a Dispel here from Reid. So if you're Orrin now, what do you do?
I think he's actually obligated to fight over these because what else are you holding that Counterflux for? Like, attacking is a non-starter at this point in the game. Reid's board is too well established. Your only hope of winning is getting these Searing Spears to resolve. Yeah, I like this a lot. I think this is really Orrin's only path to win this game.
It's tough, you know, because you know that Reid has Thragtusk looming. He's drawn so many cards this game, it's safe to believe that he has one in his hand. So, I mean, knocking him down to 2 is great, but now he's just going back up to 7. We can't attack through to get any damage through. So, you know, did we accomplish anything by counterfluxing that Dispel versus trying to save Counterflux for a Thragtusk?
I think that it would be one thing if Rest in Peace wasn't in play and our Snapcaster Mages were a live draw. But given that his only path to victory is the Searing Spears, realistically, his only path to victory is the Searing Spears that are in his hand right now, unless he can randomly get a Jace to stick, which seems unlikely here. I don't think he has much of a choice but to go for it. I mean, it looks ugly now, but I think, you know, what happens if Beasley passes? Even if he gets to counter flux the Thragtusk, and it's possible if he doesn't counter back, Reid just starts test failing him with other stuff. Reid's at 5 and you have a Searing Spear and you can't attack. Like, how do you actually close the game out from here?
Sure.
He doesn't even have a 4th Searing Spear in his deck. I mean, that's it. That's all he has.
Yep.
Silk Spider cuts off Moorland Haunt. Rest in Peace cuts off Snapcaster Mage. He doesn't really have any other way to piece together lethal, I don't think.
And now we're going to see an Oblivion Ring come into play. We're going to see a Dissipate here. And Dispel on Dissipate. So we've got a small counter war here with Orrin basically saying, I really need to get that Silk Spider off the table so I can try to get through with my Angel. And here comes the Angel.
All right, he's going to block.
They're going to bump
Now Searing
Uglies
Spear
and now
plus
Searing
Combat.
Spear that. Okay.
And now we're in a spot where if Reid has Supreme Verdict, that's just it.
Yeah.
That was all of Beasley's action. Now he's just trying to connect a couple times with Restoration Angel.
And again, as you brought up, because of Rest in Peace being in play and Orrin only having 3 Searing Spears in his deck list, that's it. We're through the Searing Spear part of the game.
Yeah.
We know that here in the booth. You guys know that at home. Reid may not know. Reid may not know that there's he may or may not know that there's a 4th Searing Spear looming. You know, we know that there isn't a 4th one though. So we're going to see
A big revelation.
a big revelation here on the main phase.
Yep.
Reid basically saying, yeah, I don't think you have a second Dispel in your hand, so I'm just going to get this over with now.
And even if you do, it's actually fine. Now you're empty-handed.
Yeah.
and That's probably... I mean, it's going to take some turns, but that revelation, I think, is going to be the death knell for Beasley.
Yeah, it's interesting just how much weight Rest in Peace carries in this matchup. It's kind of, you know, it seems minor to begin with, but this deck is a Snapcaster Mage deck.
Yeah, and a lot of Beasley's paths involve getting in a few points here and there, and then finishing him off in methods that involve the graveyard.
Yep.
Whether it's Snapcaster Mage or Runechanter's Pike, that's a big part of this deck's closing speed. And not having access to that stuff is it's devastating. I mean,
and it's as what Orrin drew for his turn was another Oblivion Ring, a card that just has really not done very much in these games, which doesn't really come as a surprise. Something that we talked about in the sideboard games, in between the games. Excuse me. It's just there aren't really any targets.
No. Yeah. I mean, Reid's deck is basically Oblivion Ring proof. In contrast to a lot of these 4-color shell decks that have enough Planeswalkers where Oblivion Ring's actually quite good.
Yeah. I mean, there's an argument to be made for Oblivion Ring Rest in Peace. It's just kind of strange, you know. I don't want to use the word waste, but I can't think of anything better to waste an Oblivion Ring on a Rest in Peace.
Yeah.
It's kind of like it's something that just needs to happen, as we are going to see the sideboarded Restoration Angel come in here for Reid.
And this will... Reid discovering a good combo, which is to use Restoration Angel with Thragtusk. You both get a leaves play and a comes into play trigger, so you get a Centaur plus another gain 5. So that's a really neat interaction that Reid's discovered, and so
Smart guy.
another wrinkle to the deck construction
Yep.
process.
It's very, very smart guy to pick up on that.
And I think we're starting to drown Beasley. Figuratively.
What's a movie where that happens, where the water comes up?
I was actually thinking of the No Surprises video by Radiohead.
Oh, okay. I was thinking
Tom York just slowly getting drowned.
I was thinking Deep Blue Sea, LL Cool J's finest movie. So
it's in a similar spectrum.
yeah, really to each their own. Samuel Jackson being eaten by a shark for no reason. Just a really great American film.
So at this point, I think Beasley's one hope is he has a long ball, Jace,
Yeah.
and somehow Reid can't handle it. That's what we're looking for at this point.
Yeah, I don't like to pronounce matches over before they're over, but it seems very tough. Even for his draw step, Orrin Druis makes a revelation, but what can he relevate into? That matters. Outside of that,
it's actually Jace, and even then, Beasley may still get decked by the Drowned Yard before Reid does.
Yeah.
It's not even clear he wins the race from there. Another Thraggy from Reid. He's still got to dissipate in the cut.
As we are going to see, it's just, I got to do a big one here for 6. And it's funny because it's like, I might not even care if you draw 6 cards because I'm Drowned Yarding you out.
Yeah, I think Reid has Dissipate in hand, and he's just contemplating whether or not he wants to save that Dissipate for a, quote, relevant spell, or if he's and he's just going to, or he's going to negate. I like the negate there because he's not particularly close to winning the game, and there's a risk that Beasley finds like Jace plus 2 counter spells or something crazy off of his Revelation, and now suddenly you're in trouble.
As we're going to see, Oblivion here take care of the Restoration Angel, or we're going to come across knocking Reid down to a healthy 19.
And another Drowned Yard activation.
And as I said, we were calling Reid the king of the Drowned Yard in San Antonio because every time I walked over, that's what I saw. As we Drowned Yard untap, get this game moving as we see a detention sphere here from Reid now. Gonna take care of some Oblivion rings here.
All right, so again, what you're going to see is Restoration Angel target Thragtusk, and again get a comes into play and at least play. I think we're asking for some sort of clarification.
Our spotter here, gotta help out with things. I guess there may be an argument to be made. Maybe he missed some sort of trigger, not entirely sure. We'll have, we'll have clarification for you guys in just a moment.
I mean, that getting out is something that's a little bit bad for me.
So
Games or something like that.
Maybe something doesn't return from those Oblivion rings. Maybe I'm not entirely sure.
Yeah.
What you guys are doing is against the deck of natural resistance.
So.
I got it over here. We're burning into like.
Oh, I understand.
Ah, okay.
Reid was trying to trigger the comes into plays in such a way that he could get Soulclash Spider into play, use it to kill Beasley's Restoration Angel, and then have his own Restoration Angel come into play. So he's just trying to set up his trigger so he could Spider.
Smart play by Reid. That's
There's a concession. Beasley made a good run out of it there, out of his mulligan 5 certainly, but Reid played very tight. I thought, protected himself as much as possible while still advancing his board, and then a big revelation later, and then that is all she wrote.
It's interesting, like that crucial turn of the game where it's possible that, it's possible that we were discussing that maybe Reid would have activated Drowned Guard and left his shields down and then got triple sphered. It just leads me to believe that, honestly, with how well Reid knows how to play his deck, that I don't think he was going to activate Drowned Guard there. You know, he just probably leaves his shields up and understands that, these 3 cards, while they would be nice to get, they don't matter right now.
Yeah, you eventually get it anyway.
Yeah.
The concern was that, I believe that Beasley's unsummoned play is just, once that occurs, there's no chance that Reid is letting his shields down for the remainder of the game, because that play, you can only justify that play if you are well within range of killing him.
Yeah.